2 college kids can replace you. You're too expensive. My name is Dennis Caldwell, and I had just heard the most insulting words of my 61 years. Patricia Reynolds, the new regional vice president at Westfield Corporation, sat across from me in her sterile office, her manicured fingers drumming against a manila folder. 16 years. That's how long I had built the sales foundation of this company, turning it from a mid-tier industrial supplier into the dominant force in our market. I understand you're looking to optimize costs, I said, keeping my voice steady. Young talent brings energy, but experience brings results. Patricia barely looked up from her spreadsheet. The numbers don't lie, Dennis. 2 MBA graduates cost half your salary and bring fresh perspectives. Trevor Davidson and Nicole Chen will handle your accounts. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not anger, not fear, recognition. I had seen this play before at other companies. New management comes in, cuts the most expensive employees, claims victory on quarterly reports, then watches everything crumble when institutional knowledge walks out the door. When do you need my transition plan? I asked. Friday. That gives you 3 days to document everything for Trevor and Nicole. Everything. 16 years of relationship building, market intelligence, competitor analysis, and client psychology. All the subtle details that made the difference between closing deals and losing them. The personal touches that kept million-dollar clients loyal through economic downturns and industry upheavals. Patricia was asking me to gift-wrap my career for 2 kids who probably still had their business school textbooks on their desks. I'll have it ready, I said, standing up. As I walked back to my office, I noticed heads turning away, conversations stopping. Word travels fast in a company this size. My assistant, Margaret, looked up with sympathetic eyes. Mr. Caldwell, I'm so sorry. This is ridiculous. Business is business, Margaret. But could you pull the client contact database for me? Full history, not just the basic information. She nodded, understanding immediately. If they wanted everything documented, they would get everything. Every client preference, every competitor weakness, every market insight I had gathered over 16 years of grinding through deals that built this company's reputation. What Patricia Reynolds didn't understand was that she wasn't just firing her most experienced sales director. She was about to hand Sterling Enterprises, our biggest competitor, the keys to her kingdom. Because the moment those client relationships started falling apart, I knew exactly where my phone calls would be going. Some lessons cost more than others. Patricia was about to learn the most expensive one of her career. I started at Westfield Corporation when it was barely a regional player. Back then, we competed for scraps while Sterling Enterprises dominated the industrial supply market in the Southwest. My first boss, Harold Westfield himself, hired me because I had spent 5 years learning the competitor landscape at a smaller firm. Dennis, he told me during my interview, I need someone who understands that business relationships aren't built in boardrooms. They're built over coffee, at job sites, and through trust. He was right. Over 16 years, I had cultivated relationships with facility managers, procurement directors, and operations chiefs across Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. When Jim Morrison at Apex Manufacturing needed emergency parts for a shutdown, I personally drove them to his plant at midnight. When Sarah Hendricks at Gulf Coast Refineries was getting pressure from her board to cut costs, I restructured our entire pricing model to save her job. These weren't just transactions. They were partnerships built on reliability, personal attention, and deep understanding of each client's unique challenges. But Patricia Reynolds saw none of that. She arrived 6 months ago with a Harvard MBA and a mandate to modernize operations. Her first move was implementing new customer relationship management software. Her second was analyzing salary-to-revenue ratios. I should have seen the warning signs. Patricia started questioning my travel expenses, asking why I needed face-to-face meetings when video calls were cheaper. She challenged my client entertainment budget, wondering if dinner meetings were cost-effective relationship building. The most telling, she never asked about the strategic value of maintaining competitor intelligence networks. The cracks started showing 3 weeks ago when I overheard her on a conference call with corporate headquarters. The sales team is top-heavy with legacy employees, she said. I can achieve the same results with lower overhead and more scalable processes. legacy employees. That's what 16 years of market expertise meant to her. Last week, Trevor Davidson and Nicole Chen started shadowing me on client calls. Both seemed capable enough, asking intelligent questions about technical specifications and contract terms, but they missed the subtleties. When Frank Gutierrez at Southwest Drilling mentioned his daughter's graduation, they nodded politely and moved on. They didn't know that Frank's family loyalty drove every business decision he made, or that remembering personal details was what separated Westfield from our competitors. Yesterday, I found Patricia reviewing organizational charts with someone from Human Resources. My name was crossed out, replaced with Davidson Chen Team. The writing was on the wall, but Patricia had no idea what she was erasing. Every client relationship, every competitive insight, every market instinct I had developed was about to walk out her door. The question wasn't whether Westfield would struggle without me. The question was, which competitor would benefit most from their mistake? The meeting with Patricia ended at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. I sat in my truck in the Westfield parking lot for 20 minutes, watching people I had worked with for over a decade walk past without making eye contact. The news had already spread. I wasn't angry. Anger is what you feel when something unexpected happens. This was calculated. Patricia Reynolds had made a strategic decision based on spreadsheets and quarterly projections. She saw my salary as an expense line item, not as an investment in competitive advantage. But she had made one critical error. In her eagerness to cut costs, she had forgotten that institutional knowledge is portable. I drove home and pulled out my personal files, 16 years of market intelligence, competitor analysis, and relationship mapping. All legally mine, all legitimately gathered through industry networking and direct experience. Every weakness in Sterling Enterprises' service model, every gap in their geographic coverage, every client frustration I had heard over coffee meetings and job site conversations. Patricia wanted fresh perspectives. She was about to get them. My phone rang at 6 p.m. Robert Sterling, Chief Executive Officer of Sterling Enterprises. Dennis, I heard some interesting news about Westfield Corporation. Word traveled fast in our industry. Competitor intelligence networks worked both ways. Robert, I'm officially unemployed as of Friday. That seems short-sighted on their part. Would you be interested in discussing opportunities? I looked at the stack of files on my kitchen table. Client preferences, competitor vulnerabilities, market timing insights. 16 years of competitive advantage that Patricia Reynolds had just made available to the highest bidder. I might be available for the right opportunity. How about we meet for breakfast tomorrow? I have some ideas about expanding our market share in your territory. Your territory. Even Robert understood something Patricia missed. Geographic markets aren't just lines on a map. They're networks of relationships, trust, and institutional knowledge. When you fire someone who built those networks, you don't just lose an employee. You potentially arm your competition. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and started documenting everything Patricia had requested. Client contact information, account histories, competitive landscapes. But I also started a separate file, a detailed analysis of Westfield's operational weaknesses, pricing vulnerabilities, and strategic blind spots. Information that would be extremely valuable to a competitor looking to gain market share. Thursday morning, I would meet with Robert Sterling. By Thursday afternoon, Patricia Reynolds would discover that firing your most experienced sales director doesn't just save money. Sometimes it hands your biggest competitor the roadmap to destroy you. Some business lessons are expensive, others are catastrophic. Patricia was about to learn the difference. My final day at Westfield Corporation started with Trevor Davidson and Nicole Chen sitting in my office, notebooks open, eager to absorb 16 years of experience in one morning. Mr. Caldwell, Trevor said, we've reviewed your client files, but we need to understand your relationship management approach. I spent 2 hours walking them through account strategies, competitive positioning, and client psychology. Nicole took detailed notes while Trevor asked pointed questions about pricing models and contract negotiations. Both seemed genuinely interested in learning. One thing I need to emphasize, I told them, is that these relationships aren't transactional. Jim Morrison at Apex Manufacturing has been buying from us for 8 years. because we saved his plant during an emergency shutdown. Frank Gutierrez at Southwest Drilling stays loyal because we remember his daughter's college graduation. These details matter more than price points. Trevor nodded. We understand the importance of relationship building. But I could see in their eyes that they didn't really understand. To them, relationship building meant quarterly business reviews and annual client appreciation events. They had no concept of the invisible threads that connected trust, reliability, and long-term partnership. At 11 a.m., Patricia Reynolds stopped by my office. "How's the knowledge transfer going?" she asked. "Trevor and Nicole are quick learners. They'll do fine." Patricia smiled. "I know this transition is difficult, Dennis, but change is necessary for growth. Your approach worked for its time, but we need scalable processes that don't depend on individual relationships. Scalable processes, individual relationships." She spoke about business like it was a manufacturing operation, not a network of human connections built over years of mutual respect and delivered promises. "Patricia," I said carefully, "these clients have been with Westfield for years because of personal trust. That trust doesn't transfer automatically." "That's exactly the problem," she replied. "We can't build a sustainable business model around personality-dependent relationships. Trevor and Nicole will develop systematic approaches that any qualified sales professional can execute." After she left, I realized Patricia Reynolds wasn't just cutting costs. She was deliberately dismantling the competitive advantages that made Westfield successful. In her mind, relationship-based selling was inefficient and outdated. She was about to discover how quickly inefficient relationships could become competitive weapons in the right hands. My farewell lunch with the sales team was awkward. Everyone knew I had been forced out, but corporate politics prevented honest conversations. Margaret, my assistant, slipped me a card with personal contact information for key clients. "They're going to ask where you went," she whispered. "Some of these people have been working with you longer than Trevor and Nicole have been out of college." At 3 p.m., I cleaned out my desk. 16 years of awards, client appreciation letters, and industry recognition certificates went into a cardboard box. Patricia watched from her office window as I carried everything to my truck. My phone buzzed with a text message from Robert Sterling. "Breakfast tomorrow at 7 a.m., Riverside Diner on Commerce Street. Looking forward to our conversation." I drove home knowing that Patricia Reynolds had made a fundamental strategic error. She assumed that cutting her most expensive employee would automatically reduce costs, but she had forgotten that in competitive industries, your biggest expense isn't payroll. It's losing market share to competitors who understand your weaknesses. Tomorrow morning, I would sit down with Sterling Enterprises' Chief Executive Officer and discuss exactly how much Westfield Corporation's institutional knowledge was worth on the open market. Patricia wanted to save money by replacing experience with fresh talent. Instead, she had just handed her biggest competitor the keys to her client base. Some mistakes are correctable. Others reshape entire market dynamics. Patricia was about to learn which category her decision belonged in. Robert Sterling was already waiting when I arrived at Riverside Diner the next morning. He looked exactly like what he was, a seasoned executive who understood that competitive advantages came from strategic thinking, not cost-cutting. "Dennis, I appreciate you meeting with me. Coffee?" We ordered breakfast and got straight to business. "I've been watching Westfield Corporation's growth over the past 5 years," Robert said. "Your market penetration in Texas and Louisiana has been impressive. We've struggled to compete in territories where you have established relationships." "Relationships take time to build," I agreed. "But they can shift quickly when circumstances change." Robert leaned forward. "I'm curious about those circumstances." Over the next hour, I explained Patricia Reynolds' strategic vision, her belief that relationship-based selling was outdated, her confidence that systematic processes could replace institutional knowledge, her assumption that clients would remain loyal to Westfield regardless of who managed their accounts. "Interesting," Robert said. "So she's essentially betting that your clients will continue doing business with Westfield, even without the relationships that originally attracted them. That's her assumption. What's your assessment of that strategy?" I pulled out a folder containing market analysis I had compiled over the years. 40% of our major clients have expressed frustration with Westfield's recent service changes. Another 30% have mentioned receiving competitive bids from other suppliers. The relationships I built were often the only thing keeping them from switching. Robert studied the documents. This is detailed competitor intelligence. 16 years of market observation, all legally gathered through industry networking and direct client conversations. Dennis, I'm going to make you an offer. Senior Vice President of Strategic Development at Sterling Enterprises. 20% salary increase, full benefits, and a mandate to expand our market share in Texas and Louisiana using your industry expertise. The offer was generous, but I needed to understand the full scope. What exactly would strategic development involve? Leading our competitive response to Westfield Corporation. Using your knowledge of their operational weaknesses and client relationships to position Sterling as the preferred alternative when those relationships inevitably deteriorate. This was exactly what Patricia Reynolds should have anticipated. When you fire someone with deep competitive intelligence, you don't just lose their knowledge. You risk that knowledge being used against you. Robert, I need to be clear about something. I won't violate any confidentiality agreements or use proprietary information. Everything I know came from legitimate industry experience and client relationships that I built personally. I understand completely. We're not asking you to steal trade secrets. We're asking you to compete using the market knowledge and professional relationships you've developed over your career. The distinction was important. I wasn't going to Sterling Enterprises as a corporate spy. I was going as an experienced sales professional who understood market dynamics that Patricia Reynolds had chosen to ignore. When would you need an answer? Take the weekend to think it over. But Dennis, I'll be honest. Westfield Corporation just made the kind of strategic error that creates market opportunities. Whether you join Sterling Enterprises or not, their decision to eliminate institutional knowledge will have consequences. I shook Robert's hand and drove home thinking about market dynamics. Patricia Reynolds believed that cutting costs would improve Westfield's competitive position. She was about to discover that in relationship-driven industries, competitive position depends more on trust and expertise than efficiency and scalable processes. Monday morning, I would call Robert Sterling and accept his offer. By Monday afternoon, Westfield Corporation's biggest competitor would have a detailed understanding of their vulnerabilities, their client relationships, and their strategic blind spots. Patricia wanted fresh perspectives. She was about to get them from the wrong direction. Monday morning, I called Robert Sterling at 8 a.m. Robert, I accept your offer. When do you want me to start? How about today? We can announce your appointment immediately and begin planning our market expansion strategy. Sterling Enterprises moved fast. By noon, press releases had gone out announcing my hiring as Senior Vice President of Strategic Development. By 2 p.m., industry trade publications were running stories about Westfield Corporation's veteran sales director joining their biggest competitor. By 4 p.m., my phone started ringing. Dennis, this is Jim Morrison at Apex Manufacturing. I just heard you left Westfield. What happened? Jim was one of my oldest clients, a facility manager who had trusted me through 3 plant expansions and 2 ownership changes. Corporate restructuring, Jim. New management wanted to go in a different direction. Who's handling our account now? Trevor Davidson. Good kid, fresh out of business school. He'll take care of you. But I could hear the concern in Jim's voice. Our relationship went back 8 years. He knew my work ethic, my reliability, my understanding of his operational challenges. Trevor Davidson was a stranger with credentials but no history. Dennis, if you don't mind me asking, where did you land? Sterling Enterprises, Senior Vice President of Strategic Development. Long pause. Sterling's your biggest competitor. They were. Now they're my employer. Over the next week, similar conversations happened with clients across Texas and Louisiana. Frank Gutierrez at Southwest Drilling, Sarah Hendricks at Gulf Coast Refineries, Tom Bradley at Houston Industrial Supply, all expressing surprise at my departure, all questioning whether their relationships with Westfield Corporation would continue under new management. I didn't encourage them to switch suppliers. I didn't need to. Relationships in industrial sales are built on trust, reliability, and personal connection. When you remove the person who built those connections, the relationships become vulnerable. Meanwhile, Trevor Davidson and Nicole Chen were discovering that client management involved more than systematic processes. Jim Morrison called them 3 times about delivery schedules before getting frustrated and demanding to speak with someone who understands our operation. Frank Gutierrez canceled a quarterly business review when Nicole couldn't answer questions about his company's expansion plans. Patricia Reynolds, to her credit, tried to address the problems directly. "Dennis," she called me at Sterling Enterprises, "several clients are asking about you. This is creating disruption in our account management. I'm sure Trevor and Nicole will establish their own relationships with time. Some clients are threatening to review their supplier relationships. This seems vindictive." Vindictive. Patricia still didn't understand. I wasn't encouraging clients to leave Westfield Corporation. I was simply no longer available to maintain the relationships that kept them loyal, despite competitive pressures. "Patricia, business relationships are personal. You decided that personal relationships were inefficient. Now you're discovering the cost of that decision. Are you actively recruiting our clients?" "I'm building Sterling Enterprises' market presence in territories where we see opportunity." "That's what you hired Trevor and Nicole to do for Westfield." The difference was that Trevor and Nicole were starting from zero, while I had 16 years of established credibility and institutional knowledge. 3 weeks after joining Sterling Enterprises, we launched our market expansion initiative, not by undercutting Westfield's prices or stealing trade secrets, but by offering superior service to clients who were already questioning their supplier relationships. Patricia Reynolds had created the perfect conditions for competitive disruption. She eliminated institutional knowledge, disrupted client relationships, and handed detailed market intelligence to her biggest competitor. Some strategic mistakes create minor problems. Others reshape entire competitive landscapes. Patricia was about to learn the difference. 6 months after joining Sterling Enterprises, the market shift became undeniable. Jim Morrison at Apex Manufacturing was our first major client conversion, followed by Frank Gutierrez at Southwest Drilling. Sarah Hendricks at Gulf Coast Refineries switched after Trevor Davidson failed to resolve a critical delivery issue that I handled for Sterling within 24 hours. The turning point came during the annual Southwest Industrial Supply Conference in Dallas. Patricia Reynolds was there, representing Westfield Corporation at their premium booth location. I was there representing Sterling Enterprises, meeting with clients who had specifically requested our presence. Wednesday morning, I walked past Patricia's booth. She was alone, staring at foot traffic that mostly ignored Westfield's display. "Dennis," she called out. "Could we talk privately?" We found a quiet corner away from the conference floor. "You're systematically destroying our client base," she said. "I'm serving clients who chose to work with Sterling Enterprises. That's called competition. This is personal vendetta. You're using insider knowledge to steal our accounts." Patricia still didn't understand. "I'm using 16 years of industry experience to build relationships with clients who value expertise over efficiency. You chose to eliminate that expertise from Westfield Corporation. I chose to take it elsewhere." Her face went pale as the implications sank in. Every client meeting I was taking, every relationship I was rebuilding, every piece of market intelligence I was applying represented competitive advantage that she had voluntarily surrendered. "The board is demanding explanations for our market share losses." "What did you tell them?" "That we're experiencing temporary disruption due to competitive pressures." I looked at Patricia Reynolds and saw someone finally grasping the full scope of her strategic error. She hadn't just fired an expensive employee. She had armed her biggest competitor with detailed knowledge of Westfield's vulnerabilities, client relationships, and operational blind spots. "Patricia, you told me that 2 college kids could replace me. How's that working out?" She didn't answer, but her expression said everything. 18 months later, I stood in Sterling Enterprises' new regional headquarters in Houston, built with profits from market share we had captured from Westfield Corporation. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was attended by clients who had followed me from my previous employer, industry partners who recognized our expanded capabilities, and competitors who now viewed Sterling as the dominant force in Southwest industrial supply. Patricia Reynolds was not in attendance. She had been demoted to regional manager 6 months earlier, when Westfield Corporation lost 40% of its market share to Sterling Enterprises. Her Harvard Business School case study on modernizing operations had become a cautionary tale about the strategic value of institutional knowledge. The business journals wrote extensively about Westfield's collapse, focusing on how poor personnel decisions can create competitive disadvantages. Patricia's name became synonymous with management short-sightedness, making her unemployable in any role requiring strategic thinking or competitive analysis. Robert Sterling approached me during the reception. "Dennis, this expansion exceeded our most optimistic projections. Westfield Corporation is considering selling their Southwest division." "Business is about relationships," I said. Patricia Reynolds forgot that fundamental truth. Later, driving home through Houston traffic, I reflected on the past year and a half. Patricia had been right about one thing. Change was necessary for growth. But she had misunderstood which changes would drive growth and which would destroy competitive advantage. Her attempt to replace experience with efficiency had backfired spectacularly, teaching an entire industry about the strategic value of institutional knowledge and relationship-based selling. Patricia Reynolds fired me because she believed 2 college kids could replace 16 years of market expertise. Instead, her decision became the foundation for Sterling Enterprises' market dominance and a Harvard Business School case study on strategic management failures that would bear her name forever. Sometimes the most elegant revenge is simply succeeding so thoroughly that your critics must face the consequences of their own poor judgment.